one of the co-chairs of the Chesterfield Township Democrats. For those of you who just heard that, this meeting is being recorded and will be available on YouTube after tonight's presentation. I'm going to take just a few minutes to walk through our agenda tonight and what we're hoping to accomplish. So if you've seen our postings on Facebook and other things, you know that we have a candidate, Colin Lovett, who's running for House District 100, who we're going to turn it over to and let him introduce himself to you and talk about his campaign and his needs. And then we'll be talking with our featured speaker tonight, Robert Burch, who is at Washington University. He's part of the College Democrat group. And after that, we're going to open it up to questions and answers. And hopefully this will be a very entertaining, but most importantly, an informative evening. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Merrick, who's going to be going through some announcements on behalf of the Chesterfield Township Democrats.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Mike. And thank you, all of you who are here with us tonight. We're really looking forward to our speaker and learning a lot about what's going on college campuses politically these days. Just a few quick things. Next month's meeting, we are working very hard right now on two things. One, to find a place where we can meet in person. We have great hopes of meeting in person next month. Our old venue of the Daniel Boone Library is not yet open to public groups for their meeting room. So we're working hard on that. If you yourself know of a place that could accommodate our group of, say, 50 to 100 or so, because I'll tell you about the program in a sec, please email us at askus@chesterfielddems.org. Because we could use all the help we can get in finding someplace. And our program, we are in the process of trying to get the major candidates for the US Senate in a town hall, and the Democratic candidates, including we hope to get Trudy Bush Valentine included in that group. And we think that it might be a big crowd that could show up. So it should be very interesting. So watch our Facebook page and also our website for what we're going to have to announce to you very soon, we hope, as far as a time and a place. Also, I wanted to tell you a couple of other things. I looked in early at the absentee voting for the primary. The primary is August 2nd. And absentee voting opens up 6 weeks before that election, which is June 21st. So on June 21st, you can apply in person at the Board of Elections, which is up at Northwest County, or online, or by fax, or by mail. And there will be an application on the website that you can print out if you want to do it by mail. And that website is stlouiscountymo.gov. Just stlouiscountymo.gov, and all the information will be there. And there will also be early absentee voting at the Daniel Boone Library, we believe, about 10 days before the primary. So watch for that as well on that website. And also the last thing is, remember, the absentee ballots just have to be received by August 2nd, by the time the polls would close on August 2nd. So then another thing, I'd like you to mark your calendars for July 16th, which is the big Democratic St. Louis County Democratic Gala. That is the largest event that the St. Louis County Democrats have each year. This year, it's going to be at the Leuna Center, which is on South Lindbergh. And it's going to be where the Thomas Eagleton Award will be presented, which is the biggest award that is given each year by St. Louis County Democrats. And lastly, we have an exciting, a fun, and also a community service event to mention to you. We have the Clarkson Road cleanup. There's a section of Clarkson Road that's right over at Baxter and Clarkson, a mile long, that we as Chesterfield Democrats maintain. And on Saturday, May 7th is our next one. And we meet at 10 a.m. on the southwest corner of Baxter and Clarkson. meet at 10 a.m., bring work gloves, and we have a fun time just getting to know each other as well as cleaning up the road for about an hour or so. So remember that May 7th, 10 a.m., Clarkson and Baxter, bring your work gloves, and we'll have a good time as well as do some good work for the community. So thank you so much for your attention. And I'm going to turn it back over to Mike now to introduce our speakers.
All right. Thanks, Kathy.
Mhm.
There's a lot going on, and I know these Zoom meetings are what we've been doing through COVID, and we're hopefully coming out of it. There is excitement and energy when we can all get together and do these meetings as a group. We are also looking to see if meetings can be sort of hybrid once we can start meeting in person. But until that time, we can always go clean up the road. It's a nice, hopefully nice day, get some fresh air. And it's very easy to have what they're talking about now, ventilation, as we all practice safety still in this now endemic phase of COVID. So let's move on to tonight's meeting. I'm going to now just turn it over to Colin Lovett to introduce himself. Colin is our candidate for House District 100, and he can talk about his campaign and everything else that is going on with his organization.
All right, well, thanks, Mike. Can everybody hear me okay?
I can hear you. Everybody else is muted, so I'm the only one who can respond to you. Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect, thank you. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for offering me the opportunity to introduce myself. I am Colin Lovett. I am running for House District 100, which is with the new district lines. It's Baldwin, it's Winchester, and it's a little bit of unincorporated St. Louis, right there in that mainly Baldwin territory. And I'm really excited to get started. And I'm running to serve my community, to be a voice of reason in Jefferson City, and protect the dignity and the fundamental rights that we all enjoy, and really trying to inspire hope that Democrats have an opportunity to flip some seats this cycle in the 2022 election. A little bit about me. I am born and raised in Baldwin. I went to Parkway South. I'm an Eagle Scout. So I'm from the area and have been a longtime resident. My husband and I live in Baldwin, and we're raising our daughter there, and we live with our 2 dogs and 2 cats. And by day, I am an account executive at Express Script. I also own an LGBT news and advocacy publication, and I play in a local symphony. So a couple fun facts. And as I mentioned, I'm really excited about this election because with redistricting, we really have an opportunity, I think, to flip this seat. And I know that the way that the new maps were drawn, it increases our Democratic Performance Index, which is like an average of the last 10 or so years of Democratic election data, and it makes it a little bit more competitive towards the Democratic side, and we're about 46.5% now. So which is up about 2.5 points. So Helena Webb, many of you may be familiar with her. She ran for this seat before me, and she's actually agreed to serve as my treasurer. So we're excited to pick up some of the momentum that she'd started the last couple elections and build on that and take it across the finish line. But what we're, I think, most excited about between the new maps, the new DPI, and then of course, many of you have seen probably Derek Grier, who's the incumbent for 100. He's not running again. He was also drawn out of my district. So it's an open race. There are 2 Republicans that have tossed their hats in the ring. And as of last week, when filing closed, I am the only Democrat running. So it's a little strange, but also exciting to announce that I am the Democratic nominee for District 100. So we're very excited about that. So in keeping it brief, in terms of the things that we need to help flip the seat and get out and really do some work. For one, if you haven't had the opportunity yet, I invite everyone to check out my website. It's www.voteloveit.com. There you can sign up to volunteer. We're actually going to be knocking doors starting this Saturday. We're going to host a brief training event Saturday morning at 11. And then we'll get out and knock some doors, is hoping we have good weather. We're going to do that again the following weekend as well. So if anybody has any spare time they can offer up, we would love to meet you and get out and help knock doors in the area. The other thing we need is, it's the worst part of running for office, but we need money. Every dollar that we raise helps us talk to more voters in the area. and everyone that I've talked to just about how you win. This is my first time running for anything, and everybody that I've talked to, the way to be successful is to knock as many doors and talk to as many voters as possible. So we're going to take that strategy to heart and do that. And one of the best ways to reach out and talk to voters is to buy supplies and buy mailers and buy signs, and so every dollar counts, and anything that you can contribute will really help us out. And the third thing is to spread the word. Talk to your neighbors. If anybody's interested in hosting a coffee or any other kind of event where I can come and talk to people and meet people, where we can really get the word out in the West County area about flipping this seat, I would love to connect and do that. And so the final thing I'll really ask for is, for those of you who are in District 100, I need your vote. So I hope you will check me out and consider voting for me. And I'm going to pause and open it up for any questions that anybody might have.
Well, Colin, that was a pretty extensive and thorough presentation about your needs and your outlook and the opportunities in your district. If anybody does have questions, we just want to say your campaign website again, and maybe we'll make sure we get that posted on our Facebook page for anybody who has other follow-up questions or looking to help you in other ways.
Yeah, that would be great. No, so the website again is www.votelovett, and Lovett is L-O-V-E-T-T. It's votelovett.com. And from there you can, either, like I said, register to volunteer. You can make donations to the website. And I think we've got a phone number on there that goes directly to me. So if anybody has any questions or wants to chat more, I'm available at any point, except in the next 15 minutes. Like I said, I do have a conflict, so I'm going to have to scoot out of here in a second. But, again, I really appreciate everyone's time and letting me come and say hello. And if I can connect with anybody afterwards, I would love to chat. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and good luck with your campaign. We'll all be rooting for you here as we go throughout this summer and into the election cycle this fall. So we're going to turn it now over to our featured speaker, Robert Burch. He's the programming director of the Washington University College Democrats. I can read everything that's on the Facebook posting, but you probably already have, so I think it's much more appropriate if Robert gets a chance to introduce himself personally. I think that'll be much more meaningful. And then after he's through with his presentation, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So, Robert?
All right, and yeah, real quick before I start, I thought I saw someone raise their hand, so I don't know if someone had a question. I don't want to speak over them.
I had a question, but it was for the previous fellow, so I think we have time to wait on that one. So thanks. No, please go ahead.
Sorry, Norman, I didn't see your hand.
I was late putting it up, thought of something, but I don't think fast enough these days. So go ahead. Let's hear you all about college Democrats.
All right.
All right, thank you. Here, I'm just gonna try and share my screen. I have a little presentation that I made that I think will make this go a lot better. So let me get that all pulled up real quick. Share. All right, can everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, we got you.
Okay, great.
We got it.
Perfect. So I'm kind of just here to talk about, kind of what issues are important to my generation, engaging young Democrats and stuff like that. So here. So in this presentation, first, I'm just going to introduce myself. Then I'm going to talk about like voting rights among young people, because that's something that I'm really interested in. And I think it's really important to talk about kind of as a background before launching into kind of the issues that we care about and how to communicate with us. And then also kind of looking at why these voting rights that we see are happening. So introduction, just a little bit about me. So first, I'm originally from Southern California, from Orange County, although I don't always like to start with saying Orange County because there's a bit of a conservative reputation there. But then I came to St. Louis for WashU, and at WashU, I'm part of a bunch of political and democratic and progressive clubs, like the WashU College Democrats, which is kind of how I heard about this event, WashU Roosevelt Society, or no, Roosevelt Network, which helps teach us how to write progressive legislation, part of WashU Planned Parenthood Generation Action. I've written a couple articles for my school's political review magazine, and just a little bit of campaign volunteering and stuff like that. I'm here because I really care about politics, and especially issues that affect people my age, and I kind of wanted to help spread the word about that. And then just outside of that, a little bit more about me is that I really love the outdoors, hiking. I love going to the beach when I'm back in California. And then I just love hanging out with my friends and family, and Marvel movies, dogs. So yeah, that's a quick introduction about me. Also, I don't know if I mentioned it, I am a political science major, possibly a minor in legal studies. We'll see as of next semester. And then, so quick notes just about like the voting gap with young people and other generations. You can see I put this little statistic that's from the Census Bureau in here, and you can see that some just important things to note about that are that voting rates among younger people are less than 50% if you're looking at the 18 to 24, the youngest group of voters, and even among the slightly older kind of millennial group, voting rates are still a lot lower than they are for other generations. And there are a few times where that's increased, and I can talk about that a little bit. And some of the interesting things that I think happened in those elections, one of which was 2020, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But as you can also see, youth voting, it kind of spikes and falls pretty quickly depending on the election. So I'm kind of interested in trying to find ways to get that more consistently high. And then, so yeah, voting continued. A few reasons why we might see these trends. I included a little, what do you call it? Some statistics from 538 that talked about how voting might actually just be harder for young people. That might be one of the reasons. And contrary to popular belief, low voter turnout among youth isn't just about apathy. And younger people have reported voting barriers that a lot of other age groups don't experience as often. And those include like the voter registration deadline, access to the voting place, absentee ballots, or trying to get off work. That's a big one, because a lot of us are kind of starting out our careers and can't really find get as much time off, and a bunch of other things. But you'll notice I put a little thing here about differences in 2020. I think that one of the things that I was saying might have increased the voting rates in 2020, because voting rates increased overall in 2020, but younger voters especially, they increased by a lot more than other groups. And I think that kind of the differences by the way that the 2020 election was conducted, with more mail-in ballots and voter accessibility, thanks to the, or not thanks to, but because of the COVID pandemic, caused a little more access to voting, which kind of indicates that it's not that young people don't want to vote, it's that it's somewhat harder for them to vote. And of course, there's a lot of other groups that voting is made harder for, but I'm kind of just talking about young people as one of them right now. Another reason that I was talking about with my friends and peers when I was kind of building this presentation about what might cause some of these lower voting rates is a lack of communication. And this is somewhat related to the previous slides, but there's just a lot that young voters don't know about voting and don't know where to find information, resources, find out what's on the ballot, know how to make an informed decision, and a ton of other things like that. People's questions just aren't being answered. And I think that a lot of that stems from different power structures, and kind of the democratic norms in organizing and campaigns are made by and for a lot of older voters, and haven't shifted as much. And this is, again, starting to change in the 2020 election. And hopefully going forward, it will continue to change, but they haven't shifted as much to accommodate the digital age, which is a lot more connected with younger voters. So this leads to some miscommunication and lack of communication. And then finally, just a quick thing about kind of disillusionment with politics and parties in general, and some disagreement on the issues. you can see that over here in these little graphs, it's happening among all parties, but since we're Democrats, we're going to be talking about the Democrat Party. There are less voters of the younger generations, again, whether you're talking about Gen Z or millennials or anyone else that's kind of younger, that feel represented by the path of the party and the way the party's going right now. And I think something that explains that is the core party agenda and candidates just aren't always as representative of the younger generations. And there's definitely some exceptions there, some notable exceptions, I think, that you can see a lot of the younger voters coalescing around certain candidates. But I think overall, the lack of representation in politics by for younger voters, both on the issues they care about and just with candidates, might also be something that's causing a lot of people to not turn out to vote at the rates that I think we can. So now moving on, I think that this is kind of going to be the brunt of the presentation, and the kind of bigger part here is messaging and the issues to kind of combat this issue and overcome the lower voting rates among young people. So I wanted to start with just giving a bit of an overview about some issues that we all care about. To find this, I kind of thought about what issues I care about, but also I'm pretty politically engaged for my age. So I also just asked around some friends and siblings and friends from classmates and things like that, just so that it's not just representative of what I care about. So a quick overview, I included like a little poll here that has just one survey that asked young Democrats about their preferences on specific policies. But the one thing about this poll is that it's just they asked specific questions. It wasn't like, what issues do you care about? It was more like, how do you support this or that? Like, so I think that causes some things to be overlooked in this poll, but it's just a kind of an interesting example if you want to read along while I'm talking. And obviously that doesn't equal the whole picture, but some key kind of takeaways from this, I think, are that a lot of the issues that some younger people care about more tend to be overlooked by a lot of parts of the party. And again, I think this is starting to change. But yeah, I think that explains some of those voting differences as well. And I've already talked about kind of younger voters becoming more progressive, but that's kind of some of the takeaways from this. So now for the issues. A big part of the younger generation, whether Democrat or Republican, but especially Democrat, is we are very liberal on social issues. So this includes a wide range of topics, but some of the key ones that I kind of heard about from people here were civil rights and racial justice. I think that this one's especially important for a number of reasons, but one of which is that a lot of people that I know got their kind of political awakening. If it wasn't during the 2016 election with the disaster that was Trump, then it was the summer of 2020 with all the injustices that happened with the police force and against the Black Lives Matter movement and a lot of those racial justice issues. So that's a super important one to us. Also women's rights, which includes, equal pay, reproductive freedoms, especially since we're starting to see those all across the country, including here in Missouri, be kind of rolled back and taken. People are starting to try and take those away. And especially for younger people, I think reproductive freedoms are super important. So that's definitely another big issue that we care about. And I think that's one that we really align very well with the Democratic Party on for the most part. Also important thing, LGBTQ plus rights are really big, especially considering that recent polling is finding that around 1 in 5 Gen Z people are LGBTQ, and even among millennials, there's higher rates of people identifying as LGBTQ than other generations. So this is becoming a really big and important issue to us. And again, it's one that we're starting to see a lot of conservatives and Republicans trying to take our rights away. another statistic that I didn't include there was that I think it was either 25 or 35% of people, younger people, know someone who is who uses gender neutral pronouns. So we're a lot more kind of tuned in to those issues than some of the rest of the country, I think. And that's really important to us. And then also just, I put affordability on there. And what I kind of mean by that is like college affordability, affordable housing, you know, healthcare, things like that. And I'll get into those a little bit later, but I think those cross over a lot into social and socioeconomic issues. Environmental issues obviously are big to us because it's the world that we're going to inherit, and we want it to still be around. We want it to still be working. So this is a big issue. Pretty much everyone that I asked included environmental issues as, or some form of that is one of the most important issues to them. And two parts that I've kind of noticed this take are like issues surrounding climate change and all the, you know, global warming, sea level rise, kind of the kind of just the world falling apart around us, especially for our future. But another part that I think is overlooked quite often is environmental justice, which is relating to a lot of the social inequalities and inequities that happen with environmental issues, and how there's certain communities, more poorer and minority communities, are going to be worse affected by climate change than wealthier and whiter communities. So that's a, and with higher mortality rates from environmental issues and things like that, that's something that a lot of people are thinking about. And the resounding kind of feel among the people that I talk to and among my generation seems to be that, like, even when stuff is being done on this issue, it's not nearly moving at a fast enough pace, which is certainly a source of worry to us, because again, this is the world that we're going to inherit, and we only have really a few solid years left to act on this issue and take really comprehensive action on this issue before it starts being too late. And so yeah. Healthcare is also one of the biggest issues to people of my generation. Healthcare being a human right, you shouldn't, you know, be unable to afford just basic necessities to live, and that also includes prescription drug prices. That's one that's overwhelmingly popular among, I showed in that first kind of polling excerpt, but among a lot of generations, including ours. And when you're talking about healthcare issues to younger voters, a lot of times I tend to hear complaints or feelings that the US is misspending the money that we have. And so money that is spent elsewhere, like a massive military budget that's still ballooning, could be better spent on making sure that everyone or more people here in the United States have access to quality healthcare and a better quality of life. But a big part of healthcare that's not talked about as much, and it's starting to get a lot more attention thanks to the, I said thanks to again, but because of the COVID pandemic and the effects of that, is mental health. I think that this is something that's massively overlooked, but it's 100% affecting our generation. There are much higher rates of mental health issues and depression and anxiety, especially among younger people. And this is an issue that we need to start taking more seriously and addressing, because it's hurting a lot of people. And I included a link to a statistic. I'm not going to pull it up just for time's sake, but it was talking about, I think, how 1 out of 3 high schoolers and college students reported like worsening mental health issues and extended periods of sadness and depression and anxiety in recent years. And that was actually before the pandemic. So you can imagine how much worse it's gotten with the isolation and anxiety of the pandemic. Education in schools is a big issue, especially because a lot of us are going through school, or those who have graduated are dealing with heavy student loan debt that they're going to carry with them for the rest of their lives if it's not paused, canceled, or otherwise relieved in some way. That's a massive issue that pretty much everyone in my generation cares about. And in a similar vein to that, just making college more affordable and accessible, because a lot of what's been happening recently, college has been getting more and more expensive. People are having to take out more loans. It's college is becoming more and more competitive, and there's issues with I can go on a whole separate rant for a whole other half an hour about the SAT and ACT and how bad those testing standards are, and how the correlations between wealth and doing well on those tests. But anyway, also kind of just relieving the immense pressure to achieve that I think a lot of college students and high school students and younger people are being increasingly faced with. And that also ties into the thing I was saying about mental health. Another issue that I think this touches is kind of censorship in schools, talking about like the LGBTQ issues in schools with the Don't Say Gay law in Florida, or similar laws that are trying to be passed elsewhere, and also like banning books that are talking about really important historical events to know about, like the Holocaust or like slavery. And then finally, I included in schools, I didn't really know where else to put it, and it's sad that it applies, but gun control is a big one to members of my generation who are Democrats, because we've certainly felt the effects of, you know, having to go through, I either know people who have been in school shootings, or know, kind of having to figure out our plan for what to do if in the event of a school shooting, or lockdown drills and all of that. That's certainly something that is affecting younger generations. Democracy and voting rights, this is a big one, I think, for all Democrats, but especially with the way that this is going to be affecting the country going forward, and the path that a lack of democracy and voting rights can take us on. This is super important to my generation, and might be a little skewed because this is probably one of the most important issues to me, because I think it affects the possibility for progress on nearly every other issue. But it connects to what I was saying about difficulty with voter accessibility and knowing how to vote and knowing where to vote, and kind of just the more barriers that are put up to people's voting, the harder it is to know how we're supposed to vote to make these changes that need to be made. Also, voter suppression, gerrymandering were two big things that came up when I was talking to people. And I also included in here representation, because I've been kind of alluding to it this whole time, but there's very low representation of people my age in Congress and the government, and all levels of government. And that's starting to change as we get older. But I think one of the things we're learning about in one of my political science classes is about how people tend to be more mobilized to vote when you have a candidate that looks like you, or who you can relate to, or who represents you better. And I think a big part of engaging my generation will be encouraging younger people to run, and encouraging support of younger people in office, so that we can directly have a say in the issues that are affecting us. And then finally, this is really general, but just progress on the issues, I think, is super important. Younger voters, we want to see things being done. And we've grown up in an era of immense partisanship and gridlock, and kind of the government not being able to get things done on the promises it's made, but also just on things that people need, on issues that people need, and relief that people need. And also a lot of the issues that we care about, like gun control or the environment or anything like that. And so there's among a lot of my generation, and this speaks to the kind of disillusionment with party representation that I was talking about earlier, but there's a lot of a perceived disconnect among my generation between the positions that a lot of people take, and a lot of the government takes, and actual action that comes of it. So like in the 2020 election, a lot of young voters got more engaged because it was a super important election. Yet a lot of the things that we were promised, like cancellation of student debt, or faster progress on the environment, they haven't come to fruition yet. So I think that that's a big thing that we see a lot of young people caring about. And if we can elect candidates and support candidates who we know or feel will do a better job of getting things done in the era that we're in, then that would be that would certainly go a long way towards engaging our generation. Also, I think that really ties into money in politics, and that's a big concern. I could have put that in democracy and voting rights, but I want to put it here too. I already talked about motivation to get things done, and this kind of speaks to representation, but the inclusion of new movements and faces, and not just kind of the same old people who have been in the government for ages and haven't gotten work done on the issues that we need them to. So that's it on the issues. I know that was a bit of a mouthful, but I can always go back to it if you guys want to visit any of those a little more closely. But now I want to just talk about real quick, knowing those issues, how do we message to younger voters, how to communicate with us? And this is another area that I feel in general is overlooked a lot, messaging to younger voters, which is a shame because younger voters make up the biggest possible voting bloc. And if we can engage those voters, then you would see probably Democratic landslides everywhere. So with that said, messaging with young people, I think one of the biggest things that I heard was people want to feel listened to and reached out to. People want to feel heard. And a lot of times it feels like there's, when talking about policy or when talking about the issues, younger voters are generally written off or ignored. And that's not always the case. That's why one of the reasons I'm here today is to talk about it. So thank you all so much for being those people who are willing to come and listen and try and make a difference so that we can engage more young people in our democracy. But also in that vein, when you're talking to younger voters or including them in, policy processes and deciding who to support and all of that, make sure to follow through with that, because it's there's even times where people kind of performatively make it seem like younger voters are heard, but nothing ever comes of it. No one ever follows through, which I think is super important when you're making a promise. This is another big one. I think can't come and talk about messaging to younger voters without talking about social media and the internet. A lot of the methods that are used with campaigns, and I've worked on a few campaigns myself, and I've noticed this, some have been better than others about this, but a lot of why messaging isn't really reaching younger voters as well is because it's not really reaching them where they're at. So younger voters are a lot more online, we're a lot more in tune with the kind of digital world, and so I think the focusing a lot more communication on reaching young voters in that realm could go a long way to engaging young voters with democratic politics. But I know that there are times like, especially Facebook and Twitter, where candidates are reaching out through social media. The one thing I will say about that, though, is, well, Twitter is kind of used among a lot of age demographics, but Facebook is something that my generation really does not use. Like, I know a few people who have a Facebook, but we don't really use it anymore. More younger voters and younger people of the younger generations are on platforms like Instagram and TikTok. Those are the two biggest ones, and Snapchat, but that's not really as much of a that's more of a messaging service. It's not as much of a social media type of way that you could engage with younger voters. So Instagram and TikTok are two, I think, two platforms that have pretty untapped potential for candidates and for democratic groups like yours to message to younger voters and get them more engaged. Now, that being said, I think that it's really important that when messaging younger people and when reaching out and engaging through social media, it's important that you don't do it in a way that comes across as out of touch, because that can have kind of an opposite effect, and nobody wants that, which is why I think inclusion of younger people, so this is what I was saying about peer-to-peer right here, kind of inclusion of younger people in the processes of messaging to younger people and running these social media accounts and kind of devising plans to engage younger people. That's going to be super important because regardless of what generation, whatever, if you're part of a group or you're part of a generation, you're going to know them best. And people are, I think, a lot more willing to listen to their peers and the social pressure that comes with their peers. That's something that we've also talked about extensively in our classes here, is kind of the social pressure of those that are close to you and the effect that that can have. So if I think really what could be really important is devising ways to tap into the people who already are politically engaged among my generation and encourage them to kind of spread the word and get everyone else among their generation, equip them with the resources to get this generation more engaged. I still have a couple slides of this, but I kind of said meet us where we are, but I also, besides digital engagement, I wanted to talk about schools and education, and then also other ways that younger people are engaged, because although we don't have as high of voting rates as a lot of other generations, we are, I'd say, a lot more involved in protests and rallies and kind of other forms of engagement, digital and non-digital like that, which again, I think it goes to show that it's not that we don't want to vote and engage, it's that we just need to find better ways to help us along that process and encourage those who don't know what to do. But also, I included this picture of like the gun protests, and along the same vein, I saw a lot of pictures on social media with people talking about the protests for the Don't Say Gay bill. And the first thing that I was thinking is, if someone was at these events, you know, registering young people to vote, talking about the importance of translating this immense passion that we have for these issues into electing people who will reflect that, then that could go a super long way to bringing change and bringing young people into politics more. So like when I say meet people where they are, I don't only mean online, I also mean other initiatives that young people are involved in. I already kind of talked a bit about shaping opinion, talking about like the social pressure aspect of things, because that among all demographics is super important, but I think it really applies to younger voters with the kind of untapped potential that like using us to contact our peers and equipping us with the tools to engage our generation, because you guys have the knowledge about how to really effectively and efficiently run all these political groups and how to get involved and how to create change, and that could be a lot of younger voters don't have that as much. We haven't experienced that, so I think teaching us how to do that can be super helpful. And then also just when you're talking to younger voters, this goes along the line of listening to them, but spending time to make sure you're having sincere conversations and really listening to people, and also talking about the importance of how the stakes of these elections and these processes that we're seeing going on in these elections. So yeah, I think this is my final. I just want to check. Oh no, I have two more. Issues, I already told you about the issues. I don't think I need to go over those too much again, but a lot of young people just don't feel like their issues are a priority. So making us, talking to people, making sure that they know that their issues matter, and that we can find people, supporting people who want to make change on these issues, so that younger voters can see the action on the issues that they hope for and that they vote for. And so that they don't feel let down by a promise made that is then diluted into something that barely addresses the issue. That can be really helpful. On this next one, I just included a little bit of a graph from, I think this was Pew Research. So that's about representation in Congress and in the House and the Senate, but this applies to a lot of other levels of government. Younger voters have very little representation in government, and I think that that's a big barrier to stopping them from voting as passionately as they could have, because people vote for people like them. But this doesn't just apply in government, it also applies in a lot of other realms. Just like as long as younger people are represented in the decision-making processes or the the outreach processes, I think that you'll see a lot more engagement among young people. And then finally, talked about bringing change and wanting change and frustration over the pace of that, because this era that we've grown up in, it seemed like there's so many issues. A lot of us are brought to feel that the world is on fire among us, around us, but there's nothing that we can really do. We either feel hopeless or feel frustrated. And that's kind of where the title of this talk came in. I shifted away from it a bit when I was making this presentation, but a lot of young people feel like we're simultaneously being told that, like, oh yeah, your generation's going to fix this, and we're going to be forced to fix it. But then also people aren't listening to us when we try and start that process, and we don't have the resources to do that. And then finally, I've really been stressing equipping younger people to engage our own generation and to engage in politics, because this graph here, it might be a little small, but it basically just shows the younger people's attitude towards whether they have the power to change things. They overwhelmingly feel that they can have the power to change things, but it's just that we don't have often the knowledge or kind of experience to know how to apply that. And I think that helping younger voters with that would go a long way. I can summarize if you want. Basically, we talked about lower voting rates, how that's high in some other forms of engagement, and what that indicates about like younger voters being interested but not really able to engage as much, or even sometimes feeling dissuaded from engaging because of the results of that. And it's been increasing recently, young youth voter engagement. I think that a few big reasons for that are, one, we're starting to see increasing use of digital campaign and organizing tools that are starting to reach younger generations where they're at a little more, which will help engage us. Just one thing, kind of an aside, is that like when I've been making calls, this is true, and just like from knowledge about my friends, we don't answer the phone very often. It's it's not something that people do. If you see a random number, it's either a scam or it's just someone that, if it's important, they'll leave a voicemail. So we don't answer the phone very often. So you got to start finding other ways to reach out to young voters that aren't just through phone banks, because we are very underrepresented in terms of who picks up in the phone banks. So you won't be reaching an accurate demographic there. And then also, we want to be and believe we can be more engaged, but we're just missing a few key parts that a lot of older generations have been able to develop over time. And those include knowledge, new messaging strategies that apply to younger voters instead of kind of just the way that things have been being done for a while, and then listening to us. We talked about the issues. I won't go over all of those again, but a lot of them are just surrounded to thinking about the future of our peers and ourselves and our families and our friends and the planet. And then working with us to implement these changes, so that it's not just someone who doesn't necessarily know as much about the younger generation coming in and trying to act relatable or act, because that's impossible no matter what part. If you're not really is knowledgeable or part of a group that you're trying to work with, then you're not going to be able to work towards fixing the issues that they face as well as people of our generation would. So that's kind of it. I hope I didn't go too long. I look forward to answering everyone's questions. And again, thank you so much for coming and listening, because it's really important that we start engaging younger voters more. So thank you.
Right. Thank you. Since these questions will be directed to you, I'll just keep my camera off and sort of be the voice in the background here, as I'll start with some of the questions that have already been submitted. The first one is going to be sort of very generic, and that is, you go to a great institution, Wash U, it's a very recognized campus. What do you say do you see an overall philosophy on the campus? Do you see more progressives, more conservatives? I mean, if you had to put a tone on the campus, how would you describe it?
Definitely progressive. I saw a funny statistic from or this was actually a joke, but I found the actual statistics, so I'll tell the joke. The joke was that there's the same amount of people who identify as conservative here as communist. That's obviously not true. I looked up the actual statistic, and it's that there's the same amount of people here that identify as conservative as there are any other party that's not Democrat. So an insanely small amount of conservatives go to WashU, and WashU is definitely a lot more liberal than a lot of other schools in the country, but I still think it's pretty representative of our generation that we're very majority either Democratic or left-leaning or progressive, however you want to put it. Definitely more progressive.
Okay. Something. I'm gonna
Mike,
go
we
back to
got Susan McCool.
Oh,
Raise
all
your
right,
hand.
Susan.
I'll just interrupt.
No, that's fine. Go ahead, Susan.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Robert, I have so many questions. First of all, I've read several articles about how groups of people my age, and I am certainly old enough to be your mother and maybe your grandmother, but progressive groups like ours can engage with folks your age to make a difference. We have a pretty highly educated group of folks out here, and we are very progressive, but we don't know how to reach groups like yours. So I'm wondering how do we best engage? I know you've mentioned Instagram, you've mentioned TikTok, but other than that, I mean, we have time. We have time to help with voting registration. We have lots of time, and we certainly have the ability and the experience and we want to do it. So how do we help you? How do we help you?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Thank you. I really feel that it's it's really a tough question, but I think that a lot of it comes down to finding a lot of the people, and there's no shortage of them, but finding a lot of the people who are willing to be more politically engaged among my generation, and finding them and getting helping encourage them and equip them to talk to their peers, like with the knowledge of voter registration or the knowledge of local government and politics, and a lot of that stuff that you were talking about how like you have the knowledge and just don't know how to apply it. I think kind of working with younger people to engage the ones that are not engaged will be super helpful. I also just think at least coming on to, or I don't necessarily know if there's COVID restrictions on certain college campuses, but I think like registering voters on college campuses, like one of the things that I did that I think was one of the reasons that my candidate won back at home was that she had one of the biggest areas that she kind of did or had volunteers do canvassing on, or it wasn't door-to-door canvassing, it was kind of like crowd canvassing and registering voters on was the nearest college campus. So kind of trying to reach out and meet those young voters where they're at, working with younger people who are already engaged to try and help them find ways that they can apply what they know about their peers to or can apply what you guys know about politics and about everything to what they know about their peers and what methods best engage them, and really utilizing those social networks that a lot of people of our generation are so connected. We text more. That's another one is text banking, I think is helpful, and I know it's not as the response rates and stuff aren't as high as phone banks and canvassing, but using digital tools will help a lot. So really just trying to find ways that work with younger people to have quality conversations and engage people as best as we can. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Susan. Kathy, you've got your hand raised. Kathy Merritt. Go ahead, Kathy.
Sorry, trying to get unmute here. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Robert, as you were talking about that it's harder for young people to just get to voting or to access the voting opportunity. That was breaking my heart. Sue is right. Sue and I are the same age and we're friends. I'm definitely old enough to be your mother, not quite your grandmother, but I started late. But I have a 36-year-old son that who is a very strong progressive, and I've been counting on him to change things since he was your age. And to hear that it's just so much harder, what would help the 18 to 24 age group? What kind of changes in voter accessibility or just availability to get to the polls? What would help the 18 to 24 age group most to be able to get there when they want to?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. And also something that I wanted to put in before is that one really important thing is that voting is habitual. So once people start voting, they often form that habit and continue it for the rest of their life. So if you can get young voters to vote the first 2 or 3 times, maybe even one time, they're a lot more likely to continue doing that down the line. Now, as for how to make that happen, obviously, a lot of the kind of legislation or combating a lot of the legislation that's trying to make it harder for people to vote in a lot of the more conservative states, that will be a big one, but that's not necessarily something that we can do without voting. So it's kind of this circular thing. So outside of that, I think really, and here, let me actually go back to that slide with the statistics on here. I'm going to share my screen again. Share. This slide right here with seeing these ways that younger people find it harder to vote and really coming at it from that perspective. So like a big one is a lot of people miss the voter registration deadline. So going onto college campuses and registering people to vote and making sure that their peers know about these voter registration deadlines and then can use our social media to post it and get the word out, and really encouraging us to get the word out to each other, I think will be a big one. Just being as accessible as possible to answer questions, because a lot of people don't know the voter registration process or don't know what they can and can't do or what they'll need to register to vote. So I think helping walk us through that can be super helpful. And then you see there's also a lot of stuff about like not being able to vote because you couldn't get off work or you couldn't physically access your polling place, or you didn't receive an absentee ballot in time. I guess that's a little different. That's an issue with the registrar of voters. But in terms of those ones like couldn't get off work or couldn't physically access, helping people get to those places and helping even trying to get legislation passed. I don't think it's likely to happen in Missouri, but legislation passed that like would make give people time off for election day, or even just encouraging workplaces to let their workers take a certain amount of time off to go vote in the morning, or giving students the resources that they need to cast an absentee ballot and sign up for an absentee ballot. That I think can all go a really long way, really answering those questions that we have, encouraging us to giving us the answers to those questions also so that we can answer them for our peers, which will also go a long way, and kind of making sure we do it. I think a lot of times, I don't know if this is a common thing among every generation, but I feel like a lot of people, they're like, oh yeah, like I'll do it, I'll get to it, and then it just never happens. So really making sure that there's that urgency and that they are encouraged to do it.
Hey, Robert, I have an idea. Now my son, he lives in New York, and he's lived in New York a long time, but he tried and he was successful at absentee voting in Missouri for a long time. Being a progressive, he wanted his vote to count somewhere where there weren't that many liberals. You all can register at WashU as Missouri residents, can you not?
Yes, and I'm actually part of WashU Votes, which is that's where we're really trying to register as many people as we can here and encourage voting among this campus. It's a little annoying because the club is supposed to be nonpartisan, so but we
Yeah,
still
you can
try.
call it
One of the
nonpartisan, but yeah, it doesn't matter if as long
yeah.
as you. Well, that would make a tremendous amount of difference if all, what is it? How many thousand students is WashU now undergrad? 8,
I want
9,
to say
what?
8,000. Yeah.
Yeah, that many votes that were progressive would make a tremendous amount. You don't need to vote in California.
No, exactly.
But yeah, and we're all concerned about the same issues. As you were going through those issues, I'd say check, check, check. Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, we have the same. But the other thing is early voting doesn't even exist in this state unless you pretend that you're absentee voting, that you need an early absentee voting. But weekend voting, that's something that I wish we could get a big, you know, movement behind. Weekend or national holiday voting, that would for sure make a difference. And
Yeah, and
gosh,
also something else on that, like one specific issue with voting in Missouri that I heard of. I don't know how this has been progressing along, but I know that recently they've tried to put through a bill that would essentially it would remove students' ability to use their student ID to as voter ID here in Missouri. So that would essentially eliminate students' ability to vote in Missouri, which is a huge issue. And anything that we can do to stop that would be super helpful.
yeah, wow. Well, just one interesting tidbit for everybody. My son is marrying an Australian girl in August, and I met her parents a couple of weeks ago. We're visiting the States. Did all of you all know here that in Australia, it's mandatory to vote?
Mhm.
I didn't know that. I mean, that would be, I think I died and gone to heaven. We lived in a place like that. Anyway, so yeah, thank you so much for being here. So let someone else ask a question.
Michael, this is Terry Miller, and I'd love to ask Robert a question about his previous education prior to attending WashU. Did your high school education in your social studies or history or civics or whatever they called the class present the methods, the affordability, or where to access information about voting and promoting democracy?
Yeah, so that's actually something I almost included in my presentation, was talking about education on civics, because I think that that's another thing that this is more of a long-term change that would help encourage youth voting, but I think we really need to revamp our civics education in the country. And if we can't do it through the government, then you know, through families and friends and those social ties, because civics education is pretty lacking, I would say, among schools nowadays. At least for my school, it's different in some schools, but at least for my school, the civics or government class was optional. It was an AP class, so I took AP Gov because I was interested in it, but a lot of people didn't take that, and a lot of people therefore didn't kind of know about a lot of those civics processes. And even that class, it more focused on like history and like, you know, the kind of connections among different parts of the government and things like that. Didn't focus as much on things that are applicable to getting young people out to vote and getting young people to care more about voting nowadays. So I saw that issue. One of the things that I did at my school was a couple of friends and I, we started a political advocacy for youth service learning group at our school that tried to overcome a lot of those issues that we saw with the civics education. So we brought some speakers, like we brought our local representative, we went and met with the mayor, we did some like weekly or monthly announcements on that kind of just sought to civically educate people. We did some voter registration drives, registered like 30 or 40 people to vote at one of them, which was great because our school was small and there was like 100 people per grade. So that was a large amount of people for us. So yeah, I think that civics education is definitely lacking among our generation, but yeah.
Thank you, and I'm sorry.
Don, you're next.
So, what would you say about the issue of trust in our institutions, both domestically and internationally? How does that impact younger attitudes towards even the whole process of governance?
I think that really perpetuates that kind of disillusionment and disengagement thing that I was talking about, because there is a large and I'd say growing lack of trust in political and governmental institutions among all generations, not just ours, but I think it's especially damaging to have so many young people feel so little trust in our government and kind of the political processes. So yeah, I think that also ties into a lot of issues about, money in politics and transparency and things like that, how working to fix those can help fix that issue. But I definitely do notice a low level of trust. And I think that it also it definitely affects our voting rates, because a lot of people are like, well, either what's it matter anyway, or like why should I even do this? And there's only so far that you can go to convince people before yeah.
All right. Okay, Norman, you're up next.
Hi, Robert. Thank you. A quick question, a very alarming one for me. I'm really worried about the future of democracy in this country. Democracy is a rare thing, historically speaking. There's no guarantee. Some people think I'm just over obsessing about it, but I wonder, are you running into that? You had a voluminous list of issues that a lot of us, I'm sure, agree with. Are your peers worried about that? And secondly, your interest, your supreme interest in all these issues. How did you come about developing that interest? What kind of influences on your life when you were even younger?
Yeah, I am certainly worried about the democracy. I think voting rights and democracy are one of the biggest issues to me. And same with a lot of people that I know. I can't say for certain whether that's generalizable to the whole generation, because just being as politically engaged as I am, I think I attract a lot of other politically engaged people. So I can't always speak to how much that can be generalized, but at least the people that I talk to, that's something that we really worry about. And for me, I think something that's been helpful is trying to, when talking to people about that issue, trying to use that to encourage people to vote instead of encourage people to back away and say, well, it's broken, so like what can we do about it? I'd be like, well, you can vote and try and fix that, so that way we can save our democracy. The only way we're going to save it is by participating in it. So yeah, but what was your second question? It was how I got to kind of how I feel about the issues, right?
How did you become so politically interested and involved? What is there about your background that made you especially interested?
For me, my political awakening was during the 2016 election with Trump. I just remember, this is I don't think how most people get here, but for me, I just remember like one night I was I don't know, I couldn't sleep or something, so I like opened my phone and I was bored, and I saw the news app, which I had never opened, and so I went on the news app and scrolled through and saw some really interesting articles and read some. And then the next day my dad was like elated that I read the news, because I talked to him about one of the articles that I read, and that I think really encouraged me to want to be more involved. And then once I started getting more involved and seeing how important so many of these issues are, that really I guess got me to where I was here, so that now I'm involved in a lot of volunteering and clubs and stuff that are politically related. I think a lot of the way that people in my generation are getting there is through seeing their peers and kind of the social pressure that comes when like well, when I got here, my roommate wasn't registered to vote, so I like strongly pressured him to register to vote. Now he's registered. So I think that getting people more involved among our generation by kind of leading by example and having our own people kind of show why this is so important, that's going to be a way that it can really spread spread political interest and engagement.
Okay, thank you.
Remember your slide about all the frustrations with voting, and I'm sure those are probably related to the actual final election. It wasn't till probably 10 years ago I realized I think the primaries are more important than the general election, because if you don't want crazies at the end, you got to get rid of them in the primaries. And so to me, your vote in the primary is as critical, if not more critical, than the final election, because that's how you get the candidate through that you really, really want. Is that a message that somehow can resonate with younger people, where they can go out, voter turnouts are lower, and their votes could carry a greater weight to try and help stem the tide and get some early successes by focusing them on primary elections?
At least personally, I think saying it exactly like you said it right there, that like this is something that's super urgent. If you want to prevent crazies, you gotta actually get out and prevent them in the first place. And your vote can really matter. I think that that type of message will definitely engage younger people more to vote in the primaries, because I agree that that is just as important as, if not more, than the general election, just because you're choosing who runs. So yeah, definitely.
But how would you go about spreading that message to people of your generation?
I would use my social media and all my yeah, I would use a lot of my social media platforms to kind of get the idea in people's heads. And if people start seeing more and more about this on social media, it's not just like a one-off thing, then they will start paying attention to that issue more. So then hopefully, I don't know to what extent social media would actually convince someone to go out and vote, but I think it keeps that idea like kind of primed in their mind, so that way when someone finally has a conversation about it, like using the words that you were just saying and showing how important it is and how urgent it is, that like then that would result in them getting out to vote. And I think that the three things that can, or a few things that can kind of supplement that would be one, getting them the information that they need to go out and vote in the primaries. A lot of people don't even know that there's a primary going on a lot of the time. So getting them that information about how and where to vote, making it as easy as possible on them, so that there's the lowest cost to voting as possible. That will always encourage more people to vote. And then showing them why it's so important, and not only you doing that, but also encouraging the ones that you know are going to be more engaged to have these same types of conversations with their peers, and showing the value that that can have. So like, I guess like peer-to-peer conversations is the short answer of that.
One quick follow-up, and then I'll go to you, Kathy. You know, you talked about a national holiday, voting holiday, but there would be no reason why an active student group couldn't get a college campus to suspend classes on voting day. Is that an action that you think students would be successful at least for those students who want to vote in the district of their campus? I mean, there will always be students who are registered back home, but that might be a action where people could see success.
Yeah, that's one of the things WashU Votes is, which again I'm involved in, is trying to work on, is getting, if not a full day of classes, then at least like getting people to offer their class period off, where then you can go during that class, or maybe even go with that class to vote. Because I think and also we're trying to find ways to, like, you know, use our campus busing system to bring people and things like that. But so yeah, that's something that I hope comes to actually happen.
Robert, just a segue to this. This is Brian Leggett. I work at St. Louis Community College. Now, I've been dealing on the side here. The breaking news is that St. Charles Community College has just announced, because of the severe weather tomorrow that we're expecting, hail, golf ball size hail, those kind of things. This is a really unique situation. They are closing. They call it just pivoting now. So after COVID, because they have the infrastructure now they call it pivoting. They just pivot home to a safe environment for everybody. So there was no hesitation during hazardous wet weather during the winter or during even tomorrow with a thunderstorm, which is never, I've been in education for 25 years, never, and WashU never closed when I was there, you'd skate across the, on ice and everything to go to classes. But they can now do this, and so there are situations like Maryville and some others have had mental health days, where they just, it's so much easier to pivot that way and to say, hey, okay, we're going to keep on learning, but today we're going to have the day off and we're going to study mental health issues and we're just going to go out and play. But another way is we could go out and have a civic day, and get the voters out. So I just mentioned that it's just really one of the positives of COVID is that the schools are now looking at what do we do with all this infrastructure we built up around online learning when necessary.
Yeah, exactly. And
question.
I remember when there was that massive blizzard around here, they did the same thing. WashU pivoted online, which was kind of disappointing to me coming from California. I'd always heard about snow days. I wanted the snow day of my own, but still, it's definitely useful. Yeah.
All right. Kathy, I promised you would be up next. And then Dennis, you are after Kathy. And I think we're going to be close to the end of our time. So I'll continue to monitor it here, but go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about, if we wanted to follow or wanted some people to follow us, how would we set that up, say on Instagram? I mean, would there be a way that somehow we could establish those following relationships to, I know it ought to be peer to peer, but if we wanted to connect with some people, do you have any ideas about how that could be done?
Yeah, it's definitely a slow process at first sometimes. With the WashU Votes Instagram, we're kind of trying to do the same thing. I think we started that recently. We're trying to grow our following so that we can really connect to a larger portion of the campus. So if you have an Instagram, I think a big part of that is you kind of just follow people in the community and a portion of them follow you back. And I'm not a social media manager for any of my clubs, so I don't know the exact best path to do this, but I think following people, because people want followers, so you follow them back, and then being active on it, so not just being an account that sits there, but it posts a lot. You can utilize the story feature on Instagram to put up posts on your story, which is then people look through the stories and they see just a little snapshot of whatever that group is saying. So you could put a story about I don't know, about the election coming up or something like that, and then people can try and repost that. You can encourage people to repost that, and then once you start getting out to larger groups of people, then ideally more people start following you, which then means you have a bigger audience, which then means that you spread to even more groups of people and hopefully grow from there.
Yeah,
That's the idea.
I mean, I'm active on Instagram, but only with my friends. How can maybe we all could follow you and you could follow? I don't know. How could we do that?
I mean, if your group has an Instagram, I am happy to go and follow and repost stuff.
Okay, maybe Brian can help us to do that.
No, yeah, we definitely dabble in it. It's Seafield Dims. So yeah, I'll look you up, and we have all those major accounts. We spend $75. The reason we can build such an audience, and we have through COVID, is we reinvest our money into targeting through primarily Facebook, because our demographics are using still Facebook. In fact, one of the party trainings we went to, it said that 80% of the voters in the state of Missouri spend an average of half an hour on Facebook daily, and so that's not your demographic. It's the older demographic that are voting at high rates, but so they say it's still important to do all those things, but definitely we invest on average, $75 a month, in targeting a large demographic that's got political leanings our way, progressive leanings that we can target through Facebook, and that's how we can build audiences. So.
Yeah, that too. And I just followed you guys. So
Awesome.
there's one more.
I'll work on our Instagram presence. Don't have TikTok yet though.
Specific TikTok's a little harder to break into.
Yeah.
You gotta there's whole things with that.
My daughter went viral.
Use more and more.
My daughter was viral. Well, she is a YouTuber, but she's viral. She went viral pretty easily on TikTok one time, just out of the blue. You just never know what it's going to do. It was on
exactly. It's really funny. TikTok, you can go viral super easily, and like I guess you kind of just see what works. So like talking to your daughter about like what worked for you, like what do you think people would like to see, that can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Specific to some of your comments, and then maybe to Washington University, you've talked about in terms of engaging folks by perhaps, more youthful folks being involved. Does Washington University have its own polling place? It would seem to me, with your base of folks who are there, substantial component of a legislative district, a senatorial district, an aldermanic district. You've got a cadre of folks that you probably would have younger representation, or you certainly are going to then have whoever's representing that area spend a little bit more time on campus. So I guess that's my question: is there either one or more polling places on campus, and to what extent are they used, or do people maybe in fact register from their homes in other states, in other words, or other places?
Yeah, it depends on the election. I know that in like the bigger presidential and midterm elections, there is a polling place on campus. I haven't been here for one of those, but I think it's usually in the athletic complex somewhere. So we have one of those, and I think it would be nice to start getting one for even the smaller elections, because when it's so close, it's a lot more convenient. And I also know that a lot of people who are thinking about whether to register to vote or not, they approach it as kind of like a strategic thing. Like, is my vote going to have more sway in Missouri, or is it going to have more sway in, I don't know, somewhere where they're from, Florida, or like for me, California. I'm in a swing district in California, so it's a little different. But so that's, I guess, another thing that I didn't really talk about, but showing younger voters and talking to younger voters about the weight that their vote can have, I think that goes a long way. And then again, making it easier by like having a polling place.
I mean, it just strikes me, since you're involved with college, college Dems there, which is interesting. The other related question to that is, you said it had to be nonpartisan, and just your college Democrats?
Oh, WashU votes has to be nonpartisan. College Democrats obviously does not, but
okay.
there's some issues there with me being in College Democrats and WashU votes.
Well, but I guess my point might be with College Democrats, or those kinds of your group, or other groups that are promoting Democrats, is it seems like it would be a logical thing to try to promote finding where the polling places on campus, and just building the cadre of folks to elect people, or make sure you're getting attention there on campus from the elected officials that represent that area.
Yeah, and the elections that we have, and also it's a little tough right now, because the only people who have ever been on campus like before this year are really the seniors. They're the only ones that have been consistently on campus because of COVID. So a lot of people really don't know, and myself included. I'm only a first year, but I think that you're absolutely right that using that group, and I at least with my presence in that group, that's what I hope to do in the upcoming Senate elections or midterm elections. But yeah.
All right. I see we're getting close. We have about 3 minutes left to our scheduled time. I don't see any other raised hands. It's been a very fast-moving, very informative, educational evening. Robert, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to talking to us. Hopefully you've learned something, we've learned something, and we can continue to work together going forward in the future. I'll let you, if you want to have any last words you want to say as we wrap up for the evening. Everyone stay safe out there. The biggest thing I think we heard tonight was stay engaged, one-to-one communication, peer pressure. We can do that with our own friends, our own acquaintances, our own families. So there's definitely takeaways that we can use as well. So I will let Robert say any farewell words, and then we will wrap it up and say goodbye till we meet again next month.
Yeah, I guess I'll just end with thank you all so much for coming and for listening to my presentation and for caring so much about engaging my generation and just democratic politics in general, because of the importance of that. And that's really going a long way towards what I was talking about talking to and listening to and engaging young voters. So yeah, thank you all so much and have a great night.
See everybody on
Thank you.
Instagram.
We'll see you next week. Next month, sorry.
See Field Dims at Instagram. I just posted a TikTok that went 15,000 for me. So there you go.
Good night.
All right.